In the village of Ezioba, where the sun rose like a golden drum over the thatched rooftops and the air always smelled faintly of roasted maize and rain-drenched earth, there lived an old woman named Mama Oi. Her skin was dark and deeply wrinkled, a map of years lived and wisdom earned. Children said she had been born with her first gray hair, and even the elders spoke of her as if she had always been there. Every evening, when the sky turned orange and the shadows of the baobab trees stretched long over the red soil, villagers would gather around the great fire at the center of the compound. The flames danced and cracked, casting flickering shapes on the wide eyes of the children who sat closest, and the watchful adults who stood behind them. Mama Oi's voice, rough like bark and deep like the roots beneath the earth, would rise in the hush. She always began the same way: every woman should not visit a man alone. She would pause there, letting the weight of the words settle like evening dew on the villager's skin. Some children would giggle, nudging one another with the impudence of youth. Others leaned in, drawn to the gravity in her tone. Long ago, Mama Oi would continue, a girl with fire in her spirit and pride in her walk made a mistake that nearly cost her soul. You think beauty is enough. You think strength is enough. But let me tell you something my mother told me, and her mother before her: the world holds spirits that wear the faces of men. The villagers would quiet completely then. Even the fire seemed to dim slightly, as if listening. She did not listen, Mama Oi said. She thought herself wise and bold. She thought tradition was a cage and warnings were for the weak. So she followed a man into the shadows. Alone. What happened to her, the youngest children would always ask, barely above a whisper. Mama Oi's face would darken then, her eyes distant, as if she were watching the memory dance in the flames. She met the man who eats the flesh of fools. The one who smells like sweet flowers but sleeps on bones. The one whose eyes shine red in the firelight, though he hides it well by day. Silence followed. Always. And then, with a sigh like wind through dry leaves, Mama Oi would lean back and nod to the fire. Let the story teach you what pride will not. The children would walk home holding their mother's hands tightly. The women would glance over their shoulders. The men would grip their machetes a little tighter by their sides. And Mama Oi would sit alone by the fire, watching the flames like they were an old friend. She had told the story many times. But the pain in her voice never lessened. Perhaps because it wasn't just a story. Perhaps because, long ago, she had once been the girl who did not listen. Ezioba was a village cradled by hills and draped in green like a queen in her finest cloth. The people there were proud of their traditions, and their connection to the earth was as firm as the roots of the irako trees that lined the village's borders. Chickens roamed freely through the compounds, palm wine was tapped fresh each morning, and the laughter of children echoed louder than any drum. Here, everyone knew everyone, and secrets were hard to keep. Life was slow but vibrant, ruled by seasons and ceremonies. The elders held the highest respect, their words as binding as the chief's decree. Songs were sung to mark every event: birth, harvest, rain, even death. Nothing passed without the community bearing witness. At the heart of Ezioba was the marketplace, a colorful chaos of woven baskets, shouting traders, and smells of smoked fish, ground spices, and sun-warmed fruit. It was here that strangers were noticed immediately, for visitors rarely came unannounced, and none could enter without being seen. But one day, as the village women traded yams and palm oil, and the men haggled over livestock, a stranger walked in from the direction of the forest. He was tall, with skin like carved ebony and eyes that gleamed like they held stories too heavy for telling. He wore a long, earth-colored cloak, and though his feet were dusty, his presence was commanding. He introduced himself simply as Abika. He said he was a traveler from the north, searching for rest and refuge. His voice was smooth, his smile easy, and his movements graceful like a man raised on royalty. The villagers, ever hospitable, welcomed him with open arms. After all, a guest was a blessing, and the spirits frowned upon inhospitable hearts. Still, the old women watched him closely. Mama Oi, in particular, studied him from a distance. She sat beneath the shade of the old ogilasci tree and whispered to herself, "His shadow moves like smoke, but his feet do not echo on the earth." Abika settled into a small hut offered by the village head, Chief Dyke. He helped with chores, shared stories from distant lands, and gave thoughtful gifts, strange amulets, beads that glowed in the dark, and perfumes that smelled like wild orchids. The young women giggled whenever he passed. The men admired his strength and confidence. Children followed him at a distance, curious but wary. But not everyone was enchanted. Goats refused to graze near his hut. The village dogs snarled at his door at night. And the birds that once sang in the trees above his compound now flew far to nest. Something about him was different. But difference, in Easy Ioba, was not always danger. It was mystery. And mystery could be beautiful. Especially to a girl named Adaora. Adaora was the daughter of Matsi Okafor, one of the wealthiest yam farmers in Easy Ioba. With her mother long gone, taken by the fever that swept the village during Adaora's 9th year, she had grown up in a house full of brothers and uncles. Yet, despite the heavy hands and louder voices around her, Adaora carved her own path like a river cutting through rock. She was 17 and already spoken of with either admiration or envy. Her skin was the color of fresh palm kernels, smooth and radiant, and her eyes were sharp like the edge of a newly forged knife. Adaora was known not just for her beauty, but for her spirit, wild, curious, and unyielding. She questioned everything. Why should girls fetch water while boys played? Why couldn't she climb the palm trees or join in the wrestling matches? Why were some stories told only to men? These questions often brought her trouble, especially with the elders. She talks too much, they would say. She asks too many things, the women muttered. But Matsi Okafor only smiled. Leave her. She has her mother's fire. That fire drew her to Abika. From the moment she saw him in the marketplace, tall and composed, his eyes gleaming like dark honey, Adaora felt something stir within her, a dangerous blend of fascination and defiance. Who is he? She asked the vendor selling cocoyam leaves. A stranger. Calls himself Abika. No one knows much. Adaora watched him from a distance that first day. And the second. By the third day, their eyes met. Abika smiled. Adaora did not. She simply turned away, but her heart beat faster. Be careful, Ada, her cousin Neko warned. He's too smooth. Too quiet. Like water before the flood. Adaora laughed. You're afraid of your own shadow. No, Neka said quietly. But Mama Oi's story has a shadow too. And it walks sometimes. Still, Adaora was undeterred. Her pride was too strong. She believed she could handle herself, no matter the man. And Abika, with his polished voice and quiet charm, only intrigued her more. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in strokes of orange and blood red, Adaora approached Abika. You walk our village like you own it, she said boldly. I only walk where the wind allows, he replied, smiling. Is the wind your master? And are you not its sister? Adaora smirked. Clever. But she was cleverer. They began to talk. And with each conversation, her guard slipped, just a little. Abika spoke of far-off lands where the sand burned like fire and women wore gold on their ankles. He spoke of stars that fell into rivers and beasts with 10 tongues. It was hard not to listen. But Mama Oi noticed. She always noticed. She called Adaora to her compound one morning. The air was thick with the smell of drying herbs and crushed cola. Child, Mama Oi said, do not feed what you cannot kill. Adaora frowned. I don't understand. You will. Or you won't. But the spirits will understand, and they do not forgive easily. With that, she turned her back. Adaora left, annoyed and puzzled. Warnings were for the weak. She was not weak. She was fire. But even fire can be consumed by its own flame. Chapter 3, The Invitation. A week after their first real conversation, Abika extended an invitation. He caught Adora by the riverbank, where she often went to escape the noise of the compound. "I have something to show you," he said, voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "Oh." Adora tilted her head. "In the forest. A place no one else knows. A grove of whispering trees. They only speak when the sun is low." Adora's curiosity burned brighter than caution. "When?" "Tomorrow. Just before twilight. Come alone." She should have paused then. Should have remembered Mama Oi's warning. But Adora had never turned away from a challenge. If anything, the secrecy made it more thrilling. When she returned home that night, the wind whispered through the trees. The goats bleated uneasily. Even the moon, half full and pale, seemed to cast a colder light. But Adora only smiled. She would go. And she would return. Because she was Adora, and no man, no forest, no tale could frighten her. Or so she believed. Twilight fell upon Izioba like a velvet curtain. The sun sank behind the Irako trees, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the earth. The air smelled of dust, dew, and distant thunder. It was the kind of evening where silence said more than words, and Adora, dressed in her blue wrapper and matching headscarf, slipped away from the compound. No one saw her go. Or so she believed. She followed the narrow path Abika had described, winding past the edge of the farms, where the cassava fields ended and the underbrush thickened. The forest loomed ahead, dark, endless, breathing. "Just trees," she muttered to herself. "Just leaves and wind." But the deeper she went, the less sure she became. There were no birds singing. No insects buzzing. The forest was not asleep, it was watching. Abika appeared as if summoned by her breath. He stepped from behind a tall bush, his form strangely still, like a painting that had peeled itself off the wall. "You came," he said. "Of course," Adora replied, trying to mask the unease creeping up her spine. He smiled. "Come. It's not far." They walked in silence, save for the crunch of dry twigs beneath their feet. The trees here were ancient, twisted, their branches gnarled like the hands of beggars. The air grew colder. The light dimmed even though the sky was not yet fully dark. Abika spoke softly. "This place, it reveals truths. Things hidden." Adora glanced at him. "Truths about what?" "About who you are." "Who I am." She swallowed. "And who are you?" He didn't answer. Soon they reached a clearing, a circle of tall trees whose trunks were blackened as though touched by fire. In the center, a flat stone rested, wide and polished, streaked with what looked like old red stains. Adora slowed. Her feet wanted to stop. Her heart pounded. "What is this place?" "A shrine," Abika said. "Older than your people. Older than mine. It listens." He turned to her. "Come. Sit." She hesitated. "Why here?" "Because no one else comes here. No one living." Adora's mouth went dry. Abika stepped closer. His voice dropped. "You don't fear me, do you?" She forced a smile. "I don't fear anything." But her legs betrayed her, trembling slightly. Abika's eyes changed, subtly, but enough. The warmth faded, and a cold intelligence peeked through. He took her hand. His skin was no longer warm. It was cool, almost clammy. "Do you know why I chose you, Adora?" he asked. She tried to pull her hand back. He held firm. "I don't. You walk like you own the world. Like no one can tame you. That's what I needed. Spirit. Fire. His grip tightened. Adora's breath hitched. Abika, let go. But he only smiled. Not Abika, he said, voice lower now. Darker. That name belongs to the shell. Not what's inside. The forest seemed to draw nearer. The trees leaned in. The air grew thick with the scent of copper and rot. Adora yanked her hand back and stepped away. You're mad. He didn't move. You were warned. The old woman knew. But pride walks faster than fear. Behind him, shadows moved. Shapes. Silent. Watching. And Adora realized, she was not alone. Adora stepped back slowly, heart drumming in her chest like a talking drum in a war chant. The shadows behind Abika moved again, this time clearer. Not shadows, figures. Thin, bent, wrapped in strips of old cloth and bone necklaces. Their eyes glowed faintly, like embers. Who are they? Adora whispered. Abika's voice was flat. Witnesses. Eaters. They remember those who enter here and do not return. Her legs refused to move, rooted to the soil by fear. But her mind raced. Run. Move. Her instincts screamed. Abika's form began to change. It started with his eyes, which stretched wide and round, swallowing all trace of humanity. His mouth widened, lips pulling back unnaturally, revealing teeth, long, sharp, yellowed like old ivory. His fingers elongated, nails curving into claws. The air buzzed with an unnatural hum, like 1,000 mosquitoes in unison. You wore a mask, Adora gasped. Abika's voice, now distorted and layered, responded, they all do. We wear the faces you trust. He stepped closer. But you're special. Your fear seasons you differently. The figures behind him swayed, chanting low, rhythmic tones in a language she had never heard. The clearing pulsed with a terrible energy. Adora darted to the left. Abika lunged. She narrowly escaped his clawed hand, scrambling over a fallen log. Thorns tore at her wrapper. Branches clawed her skin. She ran. The forest came alive in chaos, roots seemed to twist underfoot, shadows darted in her path, branches cracked. Yet she did not stop. Behind her, she heard the inhuman growl, not like a lion or leopard, but something far older. A predator with memory. She burst into a smaller clearing, and tripped. Falling hard, she hit the ground, dirt in her mouth, pain in her ribs. She turned to see Abika above her, eyes blazing. He crouched low, ready to strike. Your heart will feed me well, he hissed. But Adora was not done. From the pouch tied to her waist, she pulled out the small gourd she always carried, a charm Mama Oye had given her, though she had scoffed at it. Break it only when you are close to the mouth of death, Mama Oye had said. She smashed it against the ground. The gourd exploded in a flash of blinding white light. The sound it made was not of clay breaking, but of thunder. Abika screamed. Smoke rose. The shadows shrieked and scattered. The air burned with sacred energy. Adora scrambled to her feet, dizzy, heart racing. Abika writhed on the ground, smoke curling from his skin, which now cracked and bubbled like yam in hot oil. You, he growled, voice crumbling. The old woman gave you protection. Adora stood over him, trembling but tall. And you, are no man. He clawed toward her, one last attempt, but the ground beneath him split, the earth itself rejecting him. From the depths, a hand, dark, skeletal, reached out and dragged him down. He screamed until the earth swallowed him whole. Silence returned. The forest exhaled. Adora ran. And this time, the trees did not resist. They parted. They let her go. She didn't stop until she saw the edge of the farms, until the scent of yam fields replaced the rot of that cursed grove. She collapsed just outside her compound, breathless and shaking. Mama Oye was waiting. "I saw the smoke," the old woman said. "You broke the gourd." Adora could only nod. Mama Oye knelt beside her. "Now you understand. Some doors should never be opened. Some men wear teeth behind their smiles." Adora wept not just in fear, but in relief. She had lived. But she would never forget.